Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Nick. I'm joined with my good friend Thurman here, who's looking awfully green today, which is really cool. Today's video, I want to talk about if you should hand feed your gecko. But before we get into that, I would ask you guys to please like the video, please subscribe, and then I encourage you to comment down below if you have any questions on the video or anything like that. I love interacting with you guys, and I love giving my advice to you guys or my opinion to you guys. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. When asking should you hand feed, I think the first thing that we should talk about is stop hand feeding. Don't hand feed. Don't hand feed. I'm gonna get into a couple reasons why you shouldn't here in a minute, but if you take away anything from this video, just take away that you just stop hand feeding. When crested geckos are born, they know that they have to eat to survive. Parents of crested geckos are not paternal, not even in the slightest. They've been known to eat their babies. You really don't need to hand feed. It's not beneficial to the animal. And it's not something that they're naturally prone to want to lean to. When you take a gecko home, or let's say you buy a gecko from me, and I ship it out to you, and first night you have your beautiful tank set up, and everything's perfect and ready for that gecko. You put that food in there, you put that gecko in there, and it doesn't eat. Don't be concerned. Do not concern yourself with this at all. It's not uncommon for geckos to, once they get into a new home, to not eat for 7 to 10 days. I mean, they're still gonna need to drink, you know, so make sure you're misting, and if you like to have a little water bowl, put a little water bowl in there, okay? They're not just gonna show up and start eating. You know, they have to get comfortable, they have to kind of figure out their territory, put their scent around the tank, then they'll feel comfortable, and then they'll slowly start to eat. A big mistake that a lot of people make, and I made this mistake too. Whenever I first got crested geckos, I first had my first geckos, I would hand feed them if they weren't eating immediately because I was panicked. And I understand the panic that everybody goes through whenever you first bring a gecko home and it's not eating. Because Thurman here, he was not as chonky as he is now when I first got him. And I actually had a very hard time putting weight on Thurman. I did try hand feeding him and it didn't work. He didn't start to eat until I was offering him food and would just leave him alone for periods of time, and then he would start eating. And that's how he kind of bulked up, was just over time, which is what it takes for these guys. While I do understand the panic, don't freak out too much. Get in crested gecko groups, get in advice groups, and there's gonna be a lot of people that can help you through these beginner stages, and people that are more than happy to help you through these beginner stages, because we've all been there and we all know how freaky it can be, especially when you're dealing with something like a lizard, you know, a crested gecko that not everybody has. Typically, if a crested gecko is refusing to eat its crested gecko diet for a very prolonged period of time and refusing to eat bugs for a very prolonged period of time, and I'm talking anything over like 2-3 weeks, and they're only drinking, there's a serious problem at that point. I recommend a vet visit, maybe a fecal test to see if there's any parasites. If your gecko's not eating, and instead of hand feeding, maybe look at the enclosure and see if there's any reason why. So let's look at, let's tackle foliage at first. How much foliage do you have? If you have minimal foliage, then your gecko probably doesn't feel safe enough to come out and find food. If you add foliage, then your gecko will feel safe enough to come out and find its food. It's very important for these guys to feel comfortable in their environment before they start eating. Kind of what we went back to earlier with don't panic whenever you take a gecko home for the first time. Another big issue why your gecko probably isn't eating is temperatures. Please check the temperatures before you decide to just hand feed. If your temperatures are always at 69 or 70, your crested gecko's metabolism is going to be running so low that they don't need to eat much. If your temperatures are at 75 to 78 where they should be, then your gecko will actually eat a lot more. Your gecko will be more active. It'll burn those calories it's eating, and then it'll come back to eat more, right? So higher temps, higher metabolisms, more eating. Lower temps, lower metabolisms, less eating, slower growth rates. It goes on and on and on. If you hand feed, can they become dependent on you hand feeding? I really don't know the answer to this, honestly. My geckos that I did hand feed, they went back to feeding normally better than when I was hand feeding them. I don't know if they become dependent on it. I do know that there are some breeders out there that I've talked to and I've watched their videos on this stuff. that say that they absolutely can. And while that might be fun for you at first and you might be okay with that, it's probably not best in the long run of the gecko, especially as life happens to all of us and sometimes we get busy and we may not see our geckos for 5 or 6 days at points, you know, and you're just putting food in, misting, and moving on. And there's nothing wrong with that, but if you don't have time to hand feed, then the gecko shouldn't suffer because you don't have time to hand feed. So it's better just to not start that habit, that potential habit. The other big issue too that I see with hand feeding is it's very easy to overfeed your gecko if you're hand feeding it. Especially if they're just eating and eating and eating from your hand, they could get overweight very quickly because these guys aren't designed to eat every single day or even every other day for that matter. They will eat as they need to eat, and especially when they're growing and when they're younger, they don't eat much, and that's why it's important to supplement crickets and things like that because that helps get that protein, that helps them grow quicker, things like that. Hand feeding doesn't really do the same, and it can really do more harm than good in the long run. I have found for geckos that are stubborn and haven't been able to eat, I checked my foliage, it was good. I checked my temperatures, they were great. Humidity, fine. The big thing that I found that helped these crested geckos get on food quicker is to find where they sleep and then put the food right there, right next to them. So that way when they wake up, that's the first thing they smell. That worked and still works so well for me that I don't even have to worry about it as much as I used to, especially when I was a beginner. I find where they sleep, I put their food there, so when they wake up, that's the first thing they smell. Don't be afraid, guys, to maybe for the first while, put in 2 or 3 feeding ledges, and whichever one that gecko's eating from, just keep that ledge, keep it going, don't mess with anything. Just, if this gecko's eating, it's happy. I'm not gonna change anything for it. So let it ride. Don't overthink these things. Stop hand feeding and just try to have a good time. There's a chipmunk on my porch. That's interesting. Well, that's gonna wrap up the video, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. I hope that I kind of answered some of your questions on hand feeding. I'm not saying you're a bad keeper if you hand feed. It's just probably very rarely, but it will potentially lead to problems for some people. So I think overall you probably shouldn't do it. But that's just my opinion. Comment down below if you've hand fed, if you liked your experience with it, you know, how you feel about it. But if you did like the video, you got something out of the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Go hit that subscribe button. I post a lot of themed crested gecko videos and a lot of just kind of overall advice on crested geckos. And I also like to have input back from you guys. Because everything, I'm not always right, and I know that for a fact. So having an open dialogue with people is something that I really like, and I think we do a lot in the comments. So if you have an opinion on something, you want to comment it, go ahead and comment it, and we can talk about it. But that is the video, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. Until next time, stay safe and stay positive.